Commission meeting for tonight to order. Do I use the gavel? Okay, we've officially started the meeting. We'll start out with a roll call of members.
Dirk Bowden.
Present.
Alan Bucknam.
Present.
Emery Dorsey. Here. Donna Kimsey.
Present.
Amanda Weaver.
Here.
Scott Ohm, Janet Leo, and Steve Timms are all absent tonight.
Okay, we'll now rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll move on to approving the order of the agenda for tonight's session.
I move to approve the order of the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Ready for a vote? Okay.
Motion passed 5-0.
Okay. Next, we'll move on to an approval of the minutes from June 16th.
I move to approve the minutes from June 16th.
I'll second.
We'll proceed to a vote.
Motion passed 5-0.
So now at this point, we have a public forum. So if anyone wants to speak on issues not being covered by either the public hearing, case number WZ-16-05, or for the study session, we would ask that you hold your comments until we deal with those particular issues. Is there anyone who would like to say anything outside of our topics for this evening? Anyone? And I don't see anyone listed on the sheet. So can we move on from this? Yes? Okay. All right. So we will then start the public hearing, case number WZ-16-05.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Ritchie. I'm a planner with the Community Development Department here for the City of Wheat Ridge. Tonight we are here to consider case number WZ-16-05, which is an application for a zone change to planned residential development with an outline development plan. I'd like to enter into the record the contents of the case file, zoning ordinance, and the comprehensive plan. And all appropriate notification, publication, and posting requirements have been met. Therefore, the Planning Commission has jurisdiction to hear this case. First off, a little bit of background on the property. Shown on the projector above is an aerial image taken from 2014. It shows that there's 10 lots comprised of one parcel. It's on the east side of Eaton Street between 29th and 28th Avenues. Next up, we can see the current zoning map. You'll see that the property currently has split zoning with roughly the bottom south 2/3 with R3 zoning, and the northern roughly third is R1C zoning. R3 zoning, again, we'll cover this more in depth later, but is a multifamily through duplex or single-family zoning designation, while the R1C is our smallest lot single-family zoning. When you look at the area, you can see it's a mix of residential density zonings with R3, R1C, and some pockets of R2. And then you can see along the 29th Avenue corridor, it's a bit more commercial in nature. We have some C1 zoning along 29th Avenue. Next up, we have an image that's the same 2014 aerial. We just have zoomed in so you can see the property generally as it is today. The property consists of 2 homes and a very large detached garage. The homes are on the 2 southern structures on the site, with the garage being the northern structure, and then the northern roughly third of the property is currently vacant. Next up, we're looking at an image taken from our comprehensive plan. This was adopted in 2009, designates this area as a neighborhood, which is essentially a designation for families of all ages to thrive within the city of Wheat Ridge. Next up, we'll look at some images of the existing conditions of the property. This image is taken from Eaton Street. It's looking toward the southeast. The home in the foreground is the existing home in the property, and the 2-story structure on the right is the existing multifamily project that is to the south of the subject property. This next photo is looking more directly into the site. You can see the existing detached garage on the left. In the center of the photo, to the rear behind the fence, is also on this property. It's a cottage on the property. And then the home on the right is that existing single-family home. This is an image looking at the southern property line. You can see the existing home and the existing multifamily property to the right. And again, this image now is looking more toward the north, the vacant area of the site with the existing detached garage. You can see that the public improvements in this area stop about midway through here. All of those would be improved at some point with the development of the property. It's my understanding that this large evergreen tree, the applicants are making every intent to save this tree during the construction of the project. And then just for a little bit of context here, we're looking at homes directly across the street on Eaton. We provide this just for a sense of scale for what those homes currently look like today. As well, here we have an image. It's a bit in the shadows, but it's the multifamily property immediately to the south and on the same side of Eaton Street as the subject property. So next up, I'd just like to go briefly over what the process is that would be required for this property to be redeveloped as the applicants propose. They would be going through a plan development process. It's a 2-step process. It requires both a zone change with an outline development plan, which is what we're considering tonight, as well as what we call a specific development plan. So when you look at the order of events here, the first step that's required is a neighborhood meeting. This was held on November 4th of last year. There were 12 neighbors who attended, and I would say we had very in-depth discussion about the project. The project has changed slightly from that neighborhood meeting, but not to a great degree. The first step in the application process is for the outline development plan and zone change to planned residential development. Again, this is a zoning document, changes the zoning on the property, and it defines the development standards, which we'll talk more about. When these types of applications are made separately, Planning Commission is a recommending body, so Planning Commission tonight would make a recommendation of approval or denial to City Council, who will then hear this case. So should the outline development plan and zone change be approved, the next step in the process is a specific development plan, which functions like a site plan. It would have all of the specific architecture, site design, landscape plans, things like that. When these applications are processed separately, the Planning Commission would be the final decision-making body on that application. In addition, they would also need a subdivision plat, which would remove those existing lot lines, reconfigure the property to align with their development proposal. I'm just going to briefly scroll through these. It's not going to be helpful in this way on the PowerPoint. I have these already loaded if we have questions related to the application, but the outline development plan document itself consists of 4 pages. First page, title page, development standards, general location. Second page shows the conceptual site plan with the configuration of where the homes would be, as well as where the parking would be, common areas, drainage, things like this. Pages 3 and 4 of the zoning document are more for character and for understanding how this project relates to the surrounding area. So page 3, you can see, shows a massing study in the existing neighborhood. And then page 4 shows representative architecture, as well as how the homes would relate to one another. And we have more images. We can talk about this more in depth later. So a little bit of a summary from what they're proposing. And up on the screen, I have comparing the R1C and the R3 zone district standards, which are the current zoning, as well as what they're proposing under their planned residential development. Again, the R1C allows single-family uses and accessory uses. R3 would allow single, two-family, and multifamily homes on the property. What this application is proposing is attached and detached single-family homes, household occupation, household pets. It would also include common area parking, storage, community gardens, and active and passive recreation. Next up, we have architectural standards, and currently within the city of Wheat Ridge, there are no architectural standards for single-family homes or two-family homes. But this zoning document includes the statement, architecture will be traditional and will feature covered front and rear porches, lap siding, and detailing not typically found on production homes. So again, a little bit of an architectural standard would be adopted with the zoning document. Also, the max building height in all residential zone districts in the city is 35 feet. This plan development would have a reduced maximum building height of 28 feet. Moving on, we have a maximum building coverage in the city for these two zone districts of 40%. They'd be seeking slightly higher at 43. Setbacks for these homes, I can explain this first one. Front setback is the distance between the front of the home and the front property line. The R1C requires 20 feet. The R3 requires 25. What the applicants are proposing in this instance is a little bit of a dual setback requirement. For no more than 22% of the street frontage, they would be asking for a 10-foot front setback. The remainder would be 20 feet, which is consistent with the R1C. We do want to note, though, when we've looked at the surveys of the property and the existing street frontage, the property line isn't necessarily where the street edge is. There's actually roughly 15 feet to the back of curb, or to the sidewalk between their property line. So that 10-foot setback in reality will feel larger than that. Again, next we're showing side and rear setbacks. Zoning would only require 5. They're proposing 10 feet. And then on the screen you also can see the accessory structure setbacks. Just a little bit of a summary. Again, for site design, they're proposing 9 dwelling units. These would all be oriented around a common courtyard. They would include both private space, functioning more as private yards, small private yards, as well as public common space in the courtyard. It will include common parking area at the north end of the site. There'd be no garages proposed for these homes. Access, primary vehicular access point will be at the northern end of the site into the parking area. There'll also be a pedestrian access point near the southern end. Required with the development would be a 6-foot attached sidewalk. The applicant's also proposing bulb outs, which is essentially where the curb kind of enters into the street a little bit, and it defines the parking area. We don't have final design at this point. That would come forth as part of the specific development plan. However, it will need to conform with our streetscape design manual, so we have standards in place for what this should look like. Again, final landscaping design would be part of the specific development plan. Again, they intend to keep the large evergreen tree, and they intend to include private yards, common area, and community gardens on site. And finally, architecture. Again, the intent is to provide traditional architecture. We'd also like to note that even though the homes that front Eaton Street will also be oriented interior to the courtyard, they also will have architecture that relates to Eaton Street as well. So they won't appear closed off. They'll have front and rear porches and be designed to also engage Eaton Street and not have the back of the home at Eaton. The homes themselves would be designed with what they call open and closed sides. If you have questions on that, I'd let the applicant address specifically what that means. But they recognize that this is a tight a little bit tight of a community as far as building distances from one another in certain cases. And so the architecture of the home, the way the homes are designed, both on the interior space and the exterior space, allows residents both privacy as well as interaction. Again, this is the same image in color, but this shows a massing study for the 9 dwelling units. They would be 5 in a single family and then 2 sets of duplexes, and how they relate in size to the existing structures in the area. Next up, again, we just have some more images showing, these again were provided by the applicant, showing how these homes would relate to one another as well as their common area. So next up, when we accept an application as staff, we always look to do an evaluation of our existing codes and plans that we have and that we're required to review against. One of the primary ones is our comprehensive plan. A comprehensive plan includes the following goals for neighborhood designation: to maintain and enhance the quality and character of Wheat Ridge's established neighborhoods, to increase housing options, and to increase investment and stability in neighborhood revitalization areas. And from staff's perspective, this application supports those goals. Within our city code, we include the following as a purpose for plan development. Again, there's a lot of words on the screen here. I don't necessarily need to read every one. They were all in the packet. But essentially, the goals of the purpose of plan development is to accommodate extraordinary or unique development, promote flexibility, promote efficient use of land, to preserve existing unique features, things like that. And again, in staff's opinion, this application is consistent with the purpose of a plan development. And again, as part of the application process, we send out the application to all affected agencies. These include water, sanitary, Excel, the Public Works, Fire District. We receive no concerns or no comments from all affected agencies on referral. And finally, with that, staff would like to recommend approval of the request of a zone change to planned residential development with an ODP for the following reasons. Proposal is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and other guiding documents. It meets the zone change criteria. The proposed site design and scale of the proposed homes are consistent with the neighborhood, and all requirements for an outline development plan have been met. So with that, I know the applicant also has a presentation if you're interested. We'd be happy to answer questions, and I believe there's folks in the audience who have comments as well.
Great. Sure. Andrew Gibson, 4250 Irving Street, Denver, 80211. Thanks everybody for coming tonight. I appreciate you coming out to take a look at the project and appreciate Planning Commission hearing about it. Just wanted to introduce ourselves briefly to everyone. Again, my name is Andrew Gibson. My partners are Mark O'Brien and Mark Davis over there. And on this project, we would be the owners, developers, and builders. We're a construction company. We've been located in North Denver for the past 14 years or so. We started the company in 2003. Mark O'Brien and I started it together. I have a background in urban planning, and Mark has a background in engineering. He's a licensed engineer. And Mark Davis is our commercial partner who joined us last year. So we intentionally live where we work. We like it that way because it's a short commute, and it's easy to get around, and we love our community. We love where we live, and we like to feel like the projects that we build are an asset to the community. Part of that, though, is some kind of sense of responsibility because we run into our customers everywhere, at the grocery store, on the soccer field, at school, all over the place. Mark and I both have kids in the Wheat Ridge soccer program, and Mark Davis has a kid in the Wheat Ridge school system over here. So we do feel like that's a part of our culture and a part of our company, and I think it's an important thing about who we are. So why this project? Why this idea of this pocket neighborhood of these cottages on this site? And I think that one of the things that has inspired us is sort of an idea that maybe there's a better way to do infill development. And what I want to show you next are a couple of slides of projects that are currently being built around town and some of the characteristics of those infill projects. And I'm not going to offer any commentary on whether I like the architecture or whether they're good or bad or whatever, but there are some common characteristics of current infill development that's going on around the city. And there's a ton of it going on everywhere right now. One of the things that you'll find on a lot of infill projects is the developer will maximize the building size on the site and build the largest possible structure that they can. This is not true of all projects, but several of the projects out there in terms of the scale and the architecture just don't fit in existing neighborhoods. And you'll see examples of this all over the place. And they're expensive. And a lot of that has to do with the economics of the site, the fact that the developers are paying a lot of money for these houses, and they have to build something and sell it for really a ton of money. So a lot of the projects are they're pricey. So in thinking about maybe a different way to do infill development, we've done some research and been thinking about this for years and years. With my background in urban planning and design, this is something that I read about and think about a lot. And several years ago, maybe 10 years ago, we ran across the idea of these pocket neighborhoods that are being built up in the Pacific Northwest. And now they're being built all over the country. Lisa just told me about one in Indiana that's being built by the same architect that's helping us with this project. And they just seem to make a lot of sense for infill projects. And so what I want to show you next are some photos of some pocket neighborhoods that have been built up in that area of the country, up near Seattle, and some of the characteristics of the pocket neighborhoods. So one of the big things about the pocket neighborhoods is they're really built to encourage community. So that's something that we feel is really important and that we would like to encourage. It's not a social experiment, but it's the idea that you get out of your car and you walk through the courtyard to your house. All the houses are facing in, so everyone can interact with each other as they choose. And the houses are much smaller scale than what's typically being built around Denver, especially right now. The houses on this site we're proposing to be between 800 and 1,300 square feet would be the largest. I can talk a little bit more about those floor plans later on. One of the important parts about the cottage community and about the pocket neighborhoods is this idea of layered spaces. So they're all centered around a common courtyard, which is the most public part of the project. And then you move on, and the closer you get to the house, the more private the spaces become. So there's the front area along the sidewalk, then there's a more private space inside the fenced yard, then an even more private space on your front porch where you can have a cup of coffee, glass of wine at the end of the day, and then inside the houses themselves, they're oriented so that the public space of the house is towards the front and the private spaces are towards the rear. All of the houses, too, will have rear courtyards or covered porches in the back, which will be completely private. So you want to get away, you can go out there and have dinner with your family and not have to interact with the neighbors if you don't want to. I guess this is a subjective statement on my part for sure, but we just feel that the scale and the size of the houses fit in the neighborhood a little bit better than some of the other stuff that we've been seeing built around Denver. So Lisa did a great job introducing the project. It is right right where you see there. Eaton Street's about 4 blocks west of Sheridan. One of the things, though, that it did appeal to us about this site right off the bat was its walkability, and the fact that there are so many places to go to once you park your car at home. You can walk just on that same block to Wheat Ridge Poultry or go get a smoothie. A couple blocks south is Edgewater, Sloan's Lake, and the transit on 29th and Sheridan. So the walkability of the neighborhood is really important to the concept. That's that perspective that you saw before. And this is the kind of black and white version of what's been submitted to the city as part of the ODP. So the 2 center structures are the duplex units. Those are the smaller units. Those are 800 square feet each. And the 5 outer units are the single family homes, and those are closer to 1,300 square feet each. The center courtyard you can see in the middle, and then parking up at the north. And so there'll be a carport, which will be a covered parking area with 9 spaces in it, and then an additional 5 surface area spots for a total of about 1.5 spots per unit. We're not anticipating that these houses will have sort of the typical number of cars that a larger house would have. And here's just some perspectives of and Lisa had the color ones, which is nice. So, but just some perspectives of the project. The 800 square foot units are ranch units, so those are going to be smaller in height, and they're in the center of the project. And so as you look at the project from Eaton Street, there's a variation in height with the buildings, and there's also that variation in setback that Lisa alluded to. And we think that variation is important as it faces Eaton Street, so it's not a wall of the same structure all along repeating itself down Eaton Street. I guess that's it. I do have also a 3-dimensional rendering that I can scroll through if you guys have some more detailed questions, but I'd be happy to answer any questions the Commission has or the public.
Okay, thank you. Could you stay up just for a bit? And I realize I did not stop and ask the Commission questions after your presentation, so is it okay if we sort of do a dual questions for staff and for the developer?
However you want to do it. Yeah.
Okay. So at this point, Commissioners, I'll start on this end.
I think my question is more directed towards staff than the developer. And it's to determine kind of the evaluation process of how you determine that a smaller or reduced parking ratio wouldn't be an issue for
Sure.
a street like this. It looks like most of the homes on the west side of the street don't have garages, so they predominantly park on the street, and then the multi-unit housing to the south, there could be some spillover. So just kind of talk through that if you could.
Sure, certainly. I think that those are great questions. I've had the opportunity to visit the site a number of times. However, granted, it's only during the day. So I'm not on the site, during the evening, and I would certainly recognize that the neighborhood looks like they're here, and they may be able to address it. Part of their application included a trip generation study, and with that, Public Works reviewed it. They provided estimates for how many trips they feel like this development would generate in a day, and in Public Works' opinion, it's roughly equivalent to the number of houses on the other side. So they feel like even though there's 9 dwelling units, they feel like this is probably the equivalent of 5 more typical single-family homes, which could be constructed on the property. And again, as Andrew alluded to, these are smaller units. So a reduced parking ratio from staff's concern, while it's certainly something that we recognized and talked about quite a bit internally, I think we're comfortable with what they're proposing. Just as a comparison, in our code, if there's no on-street parking, the development would require 2 off-street spaces per unit. And there is, if there is on-street parking, and there is on-street parking in this case. So certainly that's something that, Planning Commission can take into account and hear from the neighborhood. But based on the information we have, we can support it.
And those parking, the on-street parking, those would be parallel to the sidewalk? They're not at angles at this point? I know the SDP.
It's both. So the spaces underneath the parking structure would be a nose-in parking, and then 5 additional spaces would be parallel parking at the very north end of the lot. Does that
The
make
on-street
sense?
parking would be parallel as well.
I'm sorry, yes, the on-street parking is parallel, yes, sorry.
No, that's all I have.
Great. Yes, I have a couple of questions for the applicant. Mr. Gibson, I noticed that in the application, there's a 10-foot setback for about 22% of the frontage, 20-foot setback for the remainder. What components are going to be at that 10-foot setback? When I look at the ODP sheet, unless we are counting the bump out landscaping that provides that traffic calming and that parking separation as part of the setback, it looks like the structures are equivalent, with the exception of maybe one, the unit 7 there, which is set back a little more. So can you just talk us through where those 10-foot setbacks would occur?
Sure. It's the portions of units 1, 2, I'm sorry, I should have brought my glasses. It's 1, 3, and 5. Portions of those 3 houses are less than 20 feet from the setback.
1, 3, and 5. Okay. Yeah, I see that now. All right. And 7 sits far enough back that it's not far. Okay. All right. Yeah, I know we have a school friend a parent who lives on Eaton, and I know traffic and speed is an issue there on Eaton, coming down from 29th. So I'd appreciate the mention you make on page 11 with the parking pockets, creating that traffic calming. Could you talk a little bit about I know this might be a little bit more of an issue for the SDP when if we get to that, in a later meeting, but what's the general theory around these parking pockets versus just creating, a strip of parallel parking, which would be usual?
Yeah, the first one you alluded to is the traffic calming. Prior to starting Square Root in 2003, Mark O'Brien and I worked on a lot of transportation projects, and we saw the positive effects of some of those traffic calming devices on residential streets. It helps slow down traffic. It provides a more pedestrian-friendly environment for the people living on the street, and it also helps to define our little neighborhood a little bit better as well. So really, those are the 2 major reasons why we're considering those bump outs onto Eaton Street.
Okay. Thank you. Those are the questions I have.
I have a couple of questions. In your proposal, you talked about community gardens. Has there been any thought about where you would locate those in this project?
We haven't developed a detailed landscaping plan yet. Some of the likely areas might be in the southwest corner of the project, or possibly up north between the houses and the parking area, or possibly even a part of the shared commons area. We really haven't thought through all of the specific details of the landscaping yet.
But there's an intent to provide gardening space
Yes.
for the
Plus,
homeowners.
each of the houses we are intending to have short fences around so that owners can have pets and do their own gardening if they like. Some of the houses have larger yards than others.
I see. And the fence line in the side that faces Eaton Street, is that where the dashed line is on the 10-foot setback?
That's the setback. So
Oh, okay.
It would sort of be where that dark hatching ends. It would be at the property line.
Okay.
Yeah.
And those would be short fences as well, facing Eaton?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, since the beginning of the project, we've been working with staff, and it's been a concern of ours and a concern of staff's to make sure that the portion of the project that faces Eaton Street is very attractive. And yeah, so it would be like a short picket fence, I'm thinking.
And that there is a porch, you said, on the,
Yes.
the
there's
back of the unit,
Yeah, there's
but the
porches on all
Eaton
of the.
side.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Okay, on both sides.
Yeah.
Okay. And the open side, closed side reference, is that referring to the walls between the units?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
That would be the
so-
closed side, so the windows
Yeah.
are higher.
Right. So
There's
the
no
idea
direct
is,
view into somebody's dining room or whatever.
we got it.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I just had a quick question on why the parking on the north side versus the south side?
Honestly, that's the way we drew it the first time, and it works.
Oh, okay.
No, but one of the other reasons was this isn't something that we've committed to, or that that we know if we can do or not. But it would be great if we could put solar on top of the carport to help service the electrical needs of the entire community. And that south-facing roof of the carport, located on the north end of the property, would really do a great job for that.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Any more questions from commissioners?
I just have one observation. I think that you're thinking about the parking was a smart idea, putting it on the north end. Being on the south end, I think the shade from that
Yeah.
multi-story building down there would cause some buildup
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, that was another consideration.
of ice and snow, et cetera. Okay, thanks.
All right, at this point, thank you very much. We'll move on to public comment about this particular case. It looks like I have one person signed up, but that doesn't mean after this person speak, anyone who wants to come up and speak about this particular case is welcome to do so. We'll ask you to state your name and your address when you come up to speak. I have Janet Ryan. Would you like to come up and speak? All right. And again, please state your name and address. Thanks. And speak into the microphone.
My name is Janet Ryan. I live at 2825 Depew Street, so I'm concerned with the backside of the project. My house would be facing what I believe is number 9 there, so I'm concerned about the setback there. Also impacts on my fence. What's going to be the impact during construction? Currently, there are the power lines are above ground. Do you have plans to change that, and how will that impact the neighbors? Me. Those are my questions. I do appreciate the parking on the north end because I'm on the south end. Also, I think that would be a better way to manage the traffic flow because there is traffic from the the apartment building as well, and it will keep those separate.
We'll take all of these questions right now, and then we'll have a response from both staff and the developer, if that's okay. So all of this is being written down, and then we'll make sure that those questions get addressed.
Okay.
Any other comment?
Those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else at this time who would like to come up and say something? And again, state your name and address.
Yes, my name is Steve Fluke. I reside at 2845 Eaton Street, right across the street from the development. The only heartburn I'm having here are these bulbs on the street. I guess you call them the bulbs. There's 4 rental units on our side right now. And right now, even with the street the way it is, there's sometimes parking issues. And I'm just hard-pressed to understand with those bulbs that'll eliminate, I don't know what, a couple, 3 parking spaces. I guess I'm just throwing that out there for a little food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who would like to come up? You can also state your opinions or ask questions.
My name's Marion McNamee. I'm at 2809 Eaton, which is down across from the we're kind of on the corner, right on the corner of 28th and Eaton. I just wanted to make a comment about your question about the parking on the west side of the street. There actually are garages on the back sides of almost every single house on the west side of the street, just so that you know that. That's all.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to come up and speak? Okay, go ahead.
I live at 2875 Depew, which is also on the rear of this development. And my only question, first of all, I think this is like a cool idea. It's way better than like 5 McMansions. But I was just wondering what the height of like how you said the height was going to kind of vary over the development. And I'd like to see a drawing maybe, or maybe you could explain that. And if there's any way that we can kind of check in on this process during as it moves forward, that would be really cool just to see, how things are changing. And because I think the last time it was several months ago when we first heard about this. So I'd just like to kind of be up on what's going on. Thanks. Joe Woods. Thanks.
All right. Anyone else want to come up and ask questions or speak? All right. At this point, we'll have the developer come back up. And I wrote down a list of some of the questions, but I think you've got them too. And if you could, you're addressing Commission, but I'd like you to deal with all of those questions as we go through. And is staff allowed to sort of jump in as well with any questions that they might have?
That we might have.
If there's additional things. Okay, thank you. Go ahead. Why don't we start with those setbacks? I think that was the first.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
We work on projects all over the place, and I want to say this, and there's only one way for you to believe me, and that's to witness it when we start construction. But it is truly our intent to be good neighbors throughout this entire process. And so one of the things we do on all our construction projects is we will go around to all the adjacent homeowners and make sure they have our project manager's phone number and our contact information. So if there's ever a problem on the project, you know who to call and who to talk to. That being said, construction is still it's a loud and noisy process sometimes, but we'll try to be as polite and cognizant of all of our neighbors as we're going through the construction process as possible. In terms of specific questions about your fence and the setbacks on the rear of the property, we'd really just like to talk to you and see what your concerns are and try to address them. I wouldn't anticipate that we would do anything to your fence if you like it the way it is.
There was also an issue of power lines.
That's
Did you?
right.
I wasn't sure if you were concerned about them or.
I just wanted to know if that had been thought of and what the plan is, and if they go underground, how will my power then be provided?
It's my understanding that all the power supplied to the project will be underground from a central location. I don't believe that Excel is going to be interested in putting all of the power that's on that back rear lot line underground. More than likely, they will want to come off of that and put a pedestal on our property and then go underground from there. However, that gets, the way that works with Excel is we would basically show them this plan and they do the design themselves for the power on the property. We have input, but
Do we have any comment from staff and about how it works?
No additional comment.
Okay, all right.
I just have a quick thing. So Excel Energy.
Come on up, please.
I'm sorry.
It's because we're recording this and it's being broadcast.
I'm Mark Davis, 8319 Cole Street.
Thank you.
So usually that process, as Andrew was absolutely correct, we send that plan set to Excel Energy. And then Excel Energy sends it to Synergetic Design, which is their outside design firm. Then they look at all of that power around that neighborhood, look at your pedestals, look at all the different power places. They determine that. If they come back and say, great, we're going to drop those down and we're going to put pedestals, then your power line would go down and it would come in and they would have to coordinate that with you. So that's really up to them. And Andrew is 100% correct. In the pedestal going on our property, it could go in the corner up by this parking lot spaces and then distributed down the backside and through. That's all up to how they route that through the property. Then we have to adhere to that policy that Excel and Synergetic Design is the key. People kind of forget it's not Excel, it's Synergetic. So that's an important step process that they know. That's it.
Okay, did that? Okay. I think the next one was on the bulbs and the parking.
right, yes. Yeah, so, so the gentleman, Steve's comment was well said. I mean, that we are taking away some street parking with the bulb outs on Eaton Street. And so I suppose it would be a, weighing the benefits, the pros and the cons of those bulb outs, whether it provides enough benefit to the community to have them, or if it's a detriment. And we are flexible on that. I mean, we're here to make the project work. So that's something we can talk to staff about.
Sure, I'd like to potentially add, we're not to the point where we've actually thought through specific dimensions, but certainly when we see the application come in, we can make sure that if bulb outs remain in the design, they're designed in a logical manner that accommodates full parking spaces, and, we're not haphazardly putting them in a manner that doesn't accommodate, the maximization of parking. And also keep in mind with this development, if this, as an alternate, if they were to do single-family homes, potentially you could have, 5 driveways or however many driveways exiting the site and eliminating parking over time if it were to redevelop in another manner.
And I just want to clarify that the bulb outs that we're talking about are not lights. They are on the east side that are, can someone point on use the mouse to show on the screen? Just what we're clarifying?
Yes. So they're curb extensions off of the sidewalks. So they're at street level and they'd be landscaped in here. So there'd be a little landscaping area here where the bulb out is, then the sidewalk, then more public landscaping area, and then that's our property line. So that's these bulb outs, that's what we're talking about here. Here, 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 and here. And really they're very conceptual in nature, as Lisa stated. So we think it's a nice feature of the project, but
Okay. Did you?
I have a related question to that. So, in this ODP, it's envisioning essentially one curb cut for the entire development, correct? Just the one curb cut at the north for parking access, and that would be. Do we know how many curb cuts or driveways are in the existing plot? Is it two separate houses?
there's only
one,
one
though.
big curb cut
Okay.
right there. Yeah, there's a giant. It's like a 10-car garage there.
Okay.
So there's a big driveway, and there's a little cottage, and then the larger single-family home. But there's currently just a single curb cut there.
So taking into account a larger curb cut now versus a smaller egress here at the north, I understand that these bulbs might still reduce the net on-street parking, but the amount of parking there are actually parking spaces in there on the parking pad too. It's not just access to the carports, correct? Okay. And you mentioned Ms. Ritchie, that there are what about five spaces of on-grade parking in addition to the carport parking?
There are, so there's 8 or 9, I believe, under the carport. I can look in the plan, and then there's an additional 5 uncovered that would be parallel on the northern end of the parking lot.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for clarifying that, guys.
Okay, thank you. Did that answer the question? Comment about the bulb? Yes, okay.
Was there a question about building heights?
Actually, before that, there was just a acknowledgement of the garages on the west side, and I didn't know if you wanted to talk about that.
No, I don't have any comment about the garages.
Okay, was that just a comment to make people aware? Okay, very good. Could you talk then about the overall height and how it changes?
Right, so we're proposing a maximum height of the buildings of 28 feet. And actually, the tallest of the buildings on site would be.
Could you move it to the pictures that you have of the side views?
Let me. Yeah. Okay, so the unit on the left would be our tallest house, and we are thinking that one's about 25 feet tall. And those houses are the 2 single-family units up at the north, and then the 3 down at the south. Sorry, my mouse skills are poor. The ranch units probably would be no taller than 15 feet high, and those units are in the center of the development. So that's these 4 units here. And I think, Lisa, did you say zoning allows, typical single-family zoning is 35 feet?
35 feet high.
Yeah, so we're not, really these are modeled after story and a half Victorians. And that's sort of a picture of what the 2-story unit would look like there.
Did that question answer it on heights? And this is for staff, as far as if people want to follow the process as this, as the design, because obviously we're not specifically talking about the design plan tonight since this is a zoning meeting.
Correct.
But could you just comment on how people can stay involved?
Sure. So as most of you are probably aware, most of you, I'm assuming, got a letter or you saw a sign posted on the property letting you know that there was a public hearing tonight. You will also receive a letter. Those of you who received one for this evening will receive one for a city council hearing. Again, they'll post another sign on the property. We don't have a city council hearing date set at this point, but we anticipate whether the Planning Commission recommends approval or denial, City Council will still hear the case. Should the case be approved, the next application for this specific development plan also requires those same letters to go out. The property would be posted again for Planning Commission. And in addition to that, you are always certainly welcome to give community development staff a call at any time. I know I've talked with some of you on the phone. You're welcome to come up to City Hall and look at the plans in our office, and we'd be happy to discuss it at any time with any one of you in addition to the public notice requirements.
Thank you. So this is just the zoning process. We'll be going through this again with a specific site plan to talk more about the specific design aspects. Okay, at this point, if there aren't any more questions, either from Commission, any more questions from Commission? I'm going to close the public hearing so that we can move on to discussion and then a vote. So at this point, thank you very much, and thank you to everyone who came up and spoke. I'm going to close the public hearing and we'll have discussion, so I'll start out. Anybody want to? You have nothing? Okay, go ahead.
Well, one thing that I one specific thing about the ODP that I like is, if you look at 29th Avenue between Fenton and Depew and Chase, there's a lot of, it's zoned mostly commercial. There's a little bit of residential up there, especially right between Eaton and Depew there. And it's nice to see that parking and carport conceptualized over on that north side, because I think eventually there's a possibility that residential zoning directly to the north of this property may get turned into a commercial concern if there's further redevelopment around here. And I think that that parking and carport provides a nice buffer between the residential and possible future commercial applications. And as it exists now, it's a nice buffer between the residents of that home and this slightly more dense development down there. So I think that's the developers to be commended for that. Just the other thing I wanted to mention is I like the fact that this is it's definitely not as dense an infill as you could pack in here, and I think again that's a positive. I think it's an attractor for a lot of people who are looking for what some people might term the slightly more rural Wheat Ridge residential experience, but still be close to town, still close to the amenities that Wheat Ridge has to offer and the surrounding neighborhoods have to offer. And it does remind me of the 1930s and 40s era multifamily construction that you would see in duplex courts and apartment courts. I've seen them from California to Portland to here in Denver, and it's a lot of times those get bulldozed over and something much more dense gets put up, but it's nice to see that, and I think it's a nice way of developing a sense of community without really forcing it on everybody too, still allowing for that privacy. So those are my comments.
All I have to say is I think it's a great plan. I drove the street several times today, and it reminds me of some of the older parts of Denver, i.e. West of Broadway, south of, say, 8th Avenue, where I grew up as a kid. And we really had a sense of community because we were close together. The neighbors, we all knew each other. What I see today going on in redevelopment of areas is they bulldoze 2 houses and put up one ugly box structure. And this is just a breath of fresh air, I think. I think it's just a great idea.
I too really like the use of an appropriate scale, I guess I should say, instead of the gigantic. They look inflated to me. They look like houses on steroids or something, completely inappropriate. They shade out their neighbors. They offend me from a street level because they're just blank. They look like they were dropped out of another city maybe and plunked down in the middle of a street. So I appreciate your concerns with the scale. And I think that this mix fits with the neighborhood. And I would much rather, if I were a neighbor, I would much rather see something like this than a giant zoning envelope box, I call them, that squeezes every single square foot, and the height is just overwhelming. I love it. Good job.
I too want to echo all the sentiments. I really feel like the developers have really thought about what our community of Wheat Ridge kind of feels like. And so I appreciate thinking about the fact that we know we need to create more housing options, but it feels like you've done it in a way that you're willing to work with the local community, as well as just think about how Wheat Ridge is a little bit different than the high density stuff to our west. So, so I too very much like the concept, and very much appreciate you all being willing to hear community comments and continue with that process, especially as we move through. So at this point, I'm going to close discussion, and I will entertain a motion if someone would like to make a motion.
Yeah. You want to make the motion? I can do it. All right. Yeah, I recommend approval of case number WZ-16-05, a request for approval of a zone change from residential 1C and residential 3 to planned residential development with an outline development plan for property located at 2826 Eaton Street for the following reasons. Reason 1, the proposal is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and other guiding documents. Reason 2, the proposal meets the zone change criteria. Reason 3, the proposed site design and scale of the proposed homes are consistent with the neighborhood. And reason 4, all requirements for an outline development plan have been met.
I'll second.
Call for a vote.
Motion carried 5-0.
All right, at this point, we will be moving on to our study session for tonight regarding residential development standards. At this point, we will continue recording the Planning Commission. The official meeting is over. You are all welcome to stay for the study session section. And we will, I believe, stop broadcasting the study session, but it will be recorded. So thank you all for coming, and thank you for your comments.